they were requested to read this, and then we were able to look at outcomes of this. So was the narrative condition more effective, or the statistical condition more effective in this? And when it came to issues of gender equality among Muslim women, Dutch women, sexual minority rights, attitudes towards homosexuality, for instance, which is a big issue in Holland, and secularism in public life, so the role of the church or the role of religion in public life. So these were the things that we were interested in as dependent. And we would see that depending on whether this was being given in a narrative of a young woman coming to the Netherlands or in terms of statistics relating to all this, we see quite a lot of differences, and also saw, in this case, interesting differences between the third and second generation years. So just to give you an idea of what one could do with this type of survey experiment. Complex experimental design is possible, high number of conditions are possible. You know, if you've got 1,000 people, whoa, you know, only need 40 per condition. Make the math. 10, 20, 25 conditions. That's much more than you can start many experiments in one survey if you're very, very clever. Shouldn't be on the same topic, but stuff on different topics will be in the same survey. This again, stuff from Snyderman, I think. So a lot of different conditions. This was, do you support government help for single white, single black, single parent white, single parent black, married white, married black, married plus child white, black, and then split up between liberals and conservatives. This is stuff you're much more likely to be able to do a survey experiment, and this would be very hard to get at with a normal lab type of experiment because you need so many people. This is half of what I would do in a course on experimentation over an entire semester. So you see, it's a lot that we're trying to cover here, and I don't want to look at the slides at home. Direct treatments is what we usually talk about now. People being very aware that being asked to do something, and being aware that you ask them to do something. Watch a movie, read an article, and there's indirect treatments where subjects are much more unaware of what's happening, which is quite interesting as well. So this is direct treatment. This again is a study we did on whether the facial expressions of pictures of candidates in newspaper articles would matter, and whether pictures are more important than text again. So we had this guy who was, I think, a Bulgarian European Parliament candidate that no one would know in the Netherlands, and had 2 different photos of him, and validated that people would think that this was a much worse photo than this one, and we could compare that. And you see, we try to make it look like a newspaper article, more or less, you know, external validity. But it's all been made up by us. Here you would see another experiment we did is about migration attitudes and support for far-right populist parties. A story about street crime, essentially. And this is a story about street crime and safety cameras. And here we build migrants as those who are responsible for street crime, the right-wing party as the claimant here, and that's, I think, it. So this gives cues about migration and right-wing parties in the context of street crime. You again see very similar text. Only what is underlined here is actually been manipulated, has been added to this story compared to this story. And that made the trick. Just been published in, this is what it looked like then. So again, we make it look like a real newspaper article. You can cut out, you know, you've got some stuff around, external validity. Wouldn't work if we give people text like this, right? We want them to think that they're looking at some authoritative source in this experiment. Indirect treatments are quite interesting, and we'll just look at one of them in the interest of time. False feedback, and I'll read that out to you. This is what people get. The following test was designed to assess the level of masculine knowledge. Through the course of men's upbringing and education, emphasis is placed on particular subjects. Learning these subjects is an important part of what it means to be masculine in our society. Women are encouraged to learn different subjects. As a result, by the time people reach adult age, men are more knowledgeable of some subjects, whereas women are more knowledgeable about others. This test is designed to assess your level of knowledge of subjects that our society expects men to know. Some of this knowledge is practical or useful. Other parts of this knowledge simply reflect things to which men are typically exposed in our culture. So this has been given to men and women, especially men across the country. Through this extensive testing, you have developed a set of norms for men and women. After you have taken the test, you will see your score and how you did compared to other people who have taken this test. This test will measure your level of what we call male knowledge. That's what participants know, right? So this is the feedback they get. But this feedback is not based on their answers. These are the two experimental conditions that people came up with beforehand. Right? So this doesn't have anything to do with what people have actually been doing in the test. But this is just to give some people the feeling that your performance is not the average performance. You have way less male knowledge than the average male has, whereas you're scoring quite well actually. To make males in this case feel that they underperformed in terms of their masculinity. And then you would add the questionnaire questions that you're interested in, the consequences of this perception of underperformance. An example of false feedback. You trick people, and people will be tricked. Nobody in the experiment will get that this is made up, fabricated. Which is very good. Vignette conditions we had. There's games sometimes. Again, only one example. We're almost done. I'll zap to the next one. This is social games. People would play this on the browser within the experiment. So you're this person. There's two other persons playing with you. These are experimental parts of the experiment, really. So sometimes, and it's about passing a ball, yeah? So you're playing ball with each other in a triangle. Sometimes they would over-include you. They would always, they would always pass the ball back and forth to you. Sometimes they would under-include you. They would, more often pass the ball between those two and via you. And sometimes they would ostracize you. After a couple of times playing with you, they would only play with each other and ignore you, basically. That's the different conditions, and then dependent variables were things like self-esteem, mood, and so on and so forth. People are getting really angry and frustrated that they're not allowed to play anymore. Yeah? Just to give you again a sense of the very different ways you can use experiments in very different settings. This is one. There's virtual games being developed where you enter virtual worlds, and in this one, it's a virtual world. The interest was basically a test of the law of demand. Do lower prices lead to higher demand and vice versa? So you would enter this virtual world as something that you could buy something, and they just basically all they did is vary the price of the thing with cure light wounds. So some lotion to cure light wounds that you get when you're fighting in the world, and this lotion would be more costly in one than in the other condition. Does that actually lead to less demand? Yeah? Cool stuff. Going online, which one of these things would do is cheaper, faster, bigger. You can use multimedia, games, virtual worlds, whatever. So very nice actually to do, very, very handy actually to do experiments online in many ways, but sometimes we need to assure that participants attend to the stimulus material, and we're not quite sure that actually happens. And we talked about it yesterday already. If you look at timestamps, how quickly are they actually? When I want the participant to read a newspaper article, and I see that he clicked to the next screen already after 5 seconds, I'm going to exclude him, because there's no way he would read the entire article within 5 seconds. Then we give incentives for processing. sometimes we tell people, there's going to be a knowledge quiz later about this news article, and if you do well, you get extra money. And sometimes they will all, and at the end, they will all get extra money, but that increases their processing, the chances that they process. And then these trick questions, I've been telling you about this yesterday. So a long thing, and instead check only the none of the above option as your answer. So people needed to check this if they read the thing well, and if not, they will check out, look at that again. It's often a real concern in online experiments that you don't know what actually people did when they were exposed to the stimulus, or whether they went for a coffee while the movie you want to show them is playing. So this is typical reviewer comment. It's an actual reviewer comment that we got back on a study that was published last year finally in Journalism Mass Communication Quarterly. But he's basically saying, I don't know what happened. Either, respondents could have done anything while you wanted them to watch the stimulus online. How can we be sure? Well, in the end, we sufficiently acknowledge the limitations and suggestions of further research in this vein and encourage further research. So that was enough to get it published in the end. We were quite open to saying that, yeah, we should have done better actually, but it's still interesting. After data collection, this is the last 2 minutes now. You do a sample check, but most of the time that's not really important in experimental designs because the convenience samples are there. But this could be a sample check for how many male and female are there in the population when you do a sample. You do it. Data quality check. Are your responses complete? Do you have dropouts? Do you have dropout data so people not answering certain questions? All the stuff that you usually do after survey collections anyway, but with surveys it's often the survey companies doing this, with experiments it's often you doing this. Look at the timestamps, what do you do with people that took 4 hours to answer your 10-minute questionnaire? Especially after the stimulus and the independent variable measurement, they took 2 hours and took a bath or whatever, I don't know. Not very good. So look at that. Look at answer patterns, especially for online experiments. So you've got these people that are straight lining, always taking the same option because they want to get through very quickly. But that's something you can identify. Straight lining happens, but also patterns happen. So people with long batteries go like this all the time, and continue here again, next page. Stuff you at least can watch out for. How do you treat missing values? Don't know. So that's something. Check randomization. Take a number of social demographic variables at least. Age, gender, education, just unit, urban, rural, whatever you have in your questionnaire. Check whether they're equally distributed across the group. Whether your groups are actually identical, at least on those variables that you have. Because that should have happened according to randomization, but we don't know. So we can actually check that. And ideally then all group differences are non-significant. On all these variables which you not expect to be influenced by stimulus material, you don't want to see any significant differences between groups. Otherwise randomization might not have worked, which is a bit of a problem. Manipulation check. Do you have items that check? Sometimes we ask knowledge questions about the articles we're asking people to read, just to see whether they actually engage with it at all, whether they spotted certain things. This manipulation check is good to do in the actual experiment, and you should find differences between the groups because they should differ on whatever you manipulated. Like with this far-right party example, did you spot the PBB, the party name, in the article or not? Something you could ask people at some point after being exposed, and they should differ, the groups should differ. Of course, the ones who saw the PBB in the article should be higher, scoring higher on that than the other group. If that's not the case, you do have a problem, because that indicates that your manipulation was not strong enough, did not work. So ideally what we do with manipulations with stimulus material is make a really thorough pretest. Pilot study. Again, use students to do that. just hand out different versions of your stimulus material to different student groups and see whether they actually perceive these differences. Collect data from them and compare those different groups. Because if this doesn't pan out well, you have thrown away a lot of money and resources. Multiple items, scales, indices should be fine. And then in effect, what we usually do then, we compare the groups in the end. We usually do that in experimental research with an analysis of variance. Is the variance of something in group A around the mean different, significantly different from the variance in group B? This would be the very common approach in psychology, in some of the communication science literature. When you're a political scientist, you usually do regressions to analyze experiments, which is a very interesting thing. It's just, I think, traditional differences, and political scientists can't read ANOVAs and psychologists can't read regressions or are not used to do so. So I tend to do both, just to be sure, and then report one in the main part of the article and have a footnote somewhere saying that if you use the other. I mean, essentially, mathematically, they're identical anyway. They're doing the same thing mathematically. It's just different ways to do it, really. And so in a sense, there should be no different outcomes. I would send around. I knew I was having not much time anyway. I have about 20 slides on ANOVAs and UNCOVAs. I could send them around as well, just for those of you who are interested in some formulas and statistics behind this. Have a look at that. I'll do that this afternoon. Third variables usually shouldn't be a problem. Randomization was successful. If not, we could control. So if you see that there's more males in one group, significantly more males in one group than the other one, you could use gender as a control variable in your estimations, as something to control for, to make sure that your dependent variable in fact is really still there, and not depending on gender distributions. And if we do that, if you use third variables in your estimation, it's still, you're moving from ANOVA to an UNCOVA, which matters of covariance. Not much different, or you look at multiple regression, really, where you insert some variables. Those of you who are ever interested, I'm just telling you, the mediation or moderation process, if you ever stumble across them, if you're interested in doing that, read Andrew Hayes, 2013, go to his website. I think this process model that he has, and that's why it's on the slide, makes it so easy to look at mediation and moderation processes. Just to give you a little tip. Anyone could look at very complex models after studying Andrew Hayes for 2 hours. That's it, and we're way too late, and I'm very sorry for that, but I had the sense that experiments were quite new to many of you. So I spent a bit more time on a few things that I maybe would have. I saw you nodding a lot, so you had some prior knowledge, right? Yeah. So sorry for that. Anyway, we'll still, you'll still spend 20 minutes, and if you want so a bit longer on your tutorial session now. Same groups again. Try to translate. Try to discuss whether and how, because none of you wanted to do experimentation in your research questions so far, which is actually interesting, because when I do this with other student groups, it's happening all the time. People come up with experiments very, very quickly. So it's interesting to see that wasn't the case here. Discuss whether and how you could address your research questions through the use of an experimental design. Is there an aspect to your research question that you could tie to an experiment, where it makes sense to manipulate something and look at the outcomes of that? And ideally then again, for the presentation tomorrow, sketch a very short outline of a possible experiment. Again, 2 slides maybe, just telling us what would be the type of stimulus of manipulation I would be looking at if I look that experiment in the framework of my study. And maybe then on the second slide discuss whether it's really appropriate to do that, or whether you think it's useless anyway to do in your context. Again, 2 or 3 slides maybe for tomorrow. This is the last tutorial. Unfortunately, we won't do anything tutorial session on content analysis, which is really my passion, I think. But make sure that you tomorrow for the examination session bring these presentations. We've got an hour, so don't make them too long. Again, I think there should be some 10 slides maybe around, more or less, around now that you could present. Again, don't take too much time. Try to make it a short presentation, cover the aspect that I wanted to cover, and we'll take that hour basically to look at what was it 5 or 6 different groups came up with. And I'm quite looking forward to that actually, to see what you ended up with doing. So that's it. Again, those of you who haven't sent me the assignment, make sure you do so very soon. The sooner the better. And I'll be walking around again for the next half hour probably to listen into the different groups. Thanks, and then I'll see you tomorrow again at 10, all of you. So if you're done with the groups, you're free to leave. So don't have to wait. Okay?